Sesame!
Commander Klingon vessel. We are energizing transporter beam. Now.
One, engage!
All right, hello, welcome everyone to Star Trek from the Holodeck. I am Michael, your captain, the captain of the USS Rainman Digital, and in the studio or on the bridge with me is Ensign David. Hello, David.
Sweet. I could be considered part of the lower deck crew.
Yeah, you are definitely a lower decks type. Do you take that as an insult?
Absolutely not.
You
I am
shouldn't.
happy to be a part of the lower decks crew.
Well, listen, if Tendi was part of that crew, I'll definitely join the lower decks. I would be Ransom, like for sure.
You'd be Ransom.
Oh, what's up, Tendi? What's up, Mariner? Go away, Boimler.
See, I embrace it. I think I truly am Boimler.
No, you are. And I am too, but I'm just going to pretend I'm not. All right, so I want to welcome everyone to our very special Star Trek from the Holodeck broadcast where we are celebrating Star Trek Day. Yesterday was Star Trek Day, which marked 55 years of Star Trek. And to celebrate, David and I have decided to walk everyone through the latest details, a lot of announcements that took place during Star Trek Day, and of course, we're going to sprinkle that with our own commentary, and probably in all actuality, David, we'll only get through two topics because we talk too much.
Once we get started on one thing, it kind of blows up after that.
And I swear to God, we are not going to focus on Picard, okay, on the negatives.
Please no, please.
We're not. We'll be positive because there's lots to be happy about. I mean, Jesus, Star Trek has never been as big as it is right now. I mean, we had at most we had two Star Trek shows running at one point. We had TNG running alongside Deep Space Nine, and then TNG ended, and then we had Deep Space Nine run alongside Voyager. But we have Discovery, we have Picard, we have Lower Decks, we have Prodigy, and we have Strange New Worlds.
And Strange New Worlds coming.
And then we also have a rumored, out of Kurtzman's mouth himself, a Starfleet Academy series that's potentially in the works.
Yeah. And imagine that. I would never... Back then, a lot of people thought it was crazy thinking about 3 Star Trek series running concurrently with each other with TNG, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager.
Yeah.
Here, we're getting like 6.
It's insane.
It's insane.
It's crazy.
You're right on the one point. After watching Star Trek Day live, I fully have told myself I am not going to let Picard ruin Star Trek.
David, don't even go there.
Yeah, because there's so much. The whole day started off really well with what we saw with Prodigy and Lower Decks, and then Strange New Worlds. Strange New Worlds just... I have never been hyped more now than any other Star Trek show than Strange New Worlds because of what they're bringing to the table at this point.
There's a lot to be happy about, for sure. And we're getting to that point where this is something I've always said, Star Trek can be many things. And I feel like, and I'm going to include myself in this, I try to be objective, but it's hard to be objective when you've dedicated most of your life to Star Trek as a fan. You know, as far back as I can remember, I watched Star Trek. My very first memories of watching TV with my mother was watching the original series, the reruns. So it is hard to be objective, but I try. And it is important to remember that Star Trek can be different things. It doesn't always have to be the same thing. And I am 100% on board with that. The only time I draw the line is with lazy writing. That's the only time where I'm just like, I can't, I can't hold back. I have to say something. But now that we have so much Star Trek, I don't know if I want to focus on things that I may not like. And I think in the future, what I may do, if there's something that I just can't get behind because the writing's a little flawed, it could be better, I think I'm just going to walk away.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to walk away from that series because there are 4 other series.
Yeah, there's so many other things we can focus in on than the hate of one series.
Yeah, and add to the aggression on social media that everyone has, or not everyone, a lot of people have towards what they call new Trek, which, come on, guys, be a little If you're going to insult something, be a little more clever.
Well,
I
especially
mean, they
since,
hashtag it new Trek, like in you Trek.
Well, especially since you're clumping
That's not clever, Dave?
that not very. It's not very imaginative.
No.
But like the thing that I notice is a lot of people, because of one show, they automatically say everything sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like going, no, there's other things in the franchise that we can all like. It's similar to like comic books. It's similar to like other franchises out there that have multiple shows or multiple movies that we can all point to and say, hey, you know what? I really like that. I'm not a big fan of that, but we'll accept it for right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. There's too many good things going on to get caught up in the negative. So, all right, without further ado, let's get into this. Number one, I want to say Star Trek Day was a blessing for Star Trek fans. But a quick review of the overall event.
Yeah, we should.
As a Star Trek fan, I loved it. I just liked the idea that you could open up the app on not CBS, on Paramount Plus, and right there is the live feed for Star Trek Day. You go to Twitch, and guess what was the featured program on Twitch? Star Trek Day's live feed. You go online and look what's being promoted through numerous sponsors. Star Trek Day's live feed. You go to Facebook, multiple live feeds. That is awesome. You go to YouTube, multiple feeds for Star Trek Day. What time in history has there ever been, Dave, except right now, where you had access to Star Trek in that capacity?
Never.
So that's the beautiful thing about technology and the time that we're in when it comes to streaming. So that was exciting. I liked it. Now, when it came down to the professionalism, I want to say the quality of Star Trek Day, there were some issues as a broadcaster. I'm surprised that they hire people who, number one, can't speak very well. Number two, don't know Star Trek at all.
Yes.
That baffles me. Why do you hire people for your red carpet interviewing people that they don't know? The very idea of interviewing is you have to know a bit about the person in order to ask the right questions.
Especially when they openly actually said, I haven't watched the series.
Yeah.
And it's like, why are you here?
Yeah, exactly. What are you doing?
What are you doing here?
At least lie to me.
At least lie.
I'm used to women lying to me. Just lie.
Just lie.
Tell me it feels good.
Just tell us that basically you like the series and that be done with it. The worst thing you can do is basically say, I've never watched this before, but I'm here anyhow.
Yeah. I will say, and I don't know her name, the young woman wearing yellow during the red carpet, I apologize, I forgot her name. She was actually the host of The Ready Room 2 years ago that got canceled.
Yes.
And The Ready Room was really bad because she didn't know anything about Star Trek. But I will say, she has schooled herself because she knows way more than she did 2 years ago. So she took an active interest in finding out about the franchise she is working within. So my hat's off to her. But the other young lady they hired, I mean, why are you there? You didn't even know Star Trek.
Exactly.
It's very strange that you hire people that way. Also, the broadcast went over about an hour. Patrick Stewart didn't show up, but they didn't tell anyone until the last minute because I have a feeling a lot of people were hanging on for that last panel because of Patrick Stewart. But I will say, Dave, it made the news a little easier to digest because who delivered that news? The wonderful Jerry Ryan. My Lord. How old is she, David?
The fountain of youth. She must have access to the
She's
fountain
like
of
50
youth.
some years old and just completely just dazzles. She's a true starlet.
She is.
Yeah, she's the classic Hollywood
Almost
actress.
bombshell.
Yeah. Well,
She's almost like one of those classic
she does
Hollywood
have
bombshells.
Yeah. Well, bombshell or classic thespian
Yes.
from the 1930s, 40s era. Yeah. So that being said, let's move into the news. Okay. So we are going to try to get through as much as possible within this opening hour here. And we have about 48 minutes left. And whatever we can't get through, we will continue on a Patreon exclusive show. So without doing what Star Trek Day did to people, we're not going to wait to get to the biggest news. We are going to talk about it now.
Tackle it right now, yeah. Get it out of the way.
The final panel that didn't happen, but we did get the trailer for Star Trek Picard Season 2.
Yes.
Now, Dave, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it at the time of watching the trailer. I will say I am intrigued more than I was with the teaser. With the teaser, it just aggravated me because it was time travel again. And it felt like First Contact meets Encounter at Farpoint.
Yes.
Meets All Good Things. I'm like, well, you're doing an entire series based on inspirations from First Contact and the pilot and the finale of TNG. This new trailer still definitely reminds me of that, but there seems to be a lot more to it than simply time travel. There are Borg elements, which we knew because of the announcement that Annie Wershing was cast as the Borg Queen.
Yes.
So it seems like the series is a lot more multi-layered than the teaser as well as season 1 was, in my opinion.
Oh, by far, because there's a lot of elements going on in this, apparently in this season, than there was in season 1. Because season 1, the story thorough line was the story of Data and Picard. But I mean, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
With the teaser, with the trailer that they released, you kind of get a sense that we're going to get more of a story about the relationship between Q and Picard.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to deal with Picard's. I guess we're going to go back and try to further establish Picard, the importance of Picard's legacy because of what Q does.
Well, if they're using Q properly, then those are the types of things they will do. For example, you can't bring Q in unless you're going to have a very strong philosophical statement.
Yes.
That is what Q has always been used for in every single episode of Star Trek of The Next Generation. Deep Space Nine was kind of a cameo to help that series. It was kind of useless. But in TNG, Q was used to pose philosophical questions that at the end of the day was all about Picard. Was all about Picard and how he would move forward and what lessons he would learn.
And that's why it makes sense to me if the trailer actually just gave us a huge spoiler of the plot line of Picard is Q getting angry at Picard and changing history to show Picard the importance of his legacy, importance of him.
I like how you say upset because I noticed that. We've never seen a Q that looked malevolent or upset.
And you can tell that basically when Picard basically says, it wasn't like, and when I look back at it, it wasn't, Picard yelling at Q just angrily. It was Picard yelling at Q that he's not happy with himself.
Right.
That he's too old.
Yeah.
And then the look on Q's face when Picard just says that he's too old for this, Q looks like he gets pretty upset about it.
Well, we also don't know. We know how editing goes when it comes to trailers, so we don't even know if that reaction is necessarily to Picard because of Picard's statement.
But if that is the connection there, I actually like that because it shows that personal relationship between Q and Picard, and Q kind of like really when you get to the All Good Things storyline, Q leaves that basically hoping Picard learns a lesson, that basically he earned this point to go out to the stars, and he's earned it. And when by the end of it, it's almost like this triumphant feeling even for Q. And you get to this point, and all of a sudden you have Picard saying that he's too old, that time's passed him by. Basically, he's a shell of the man that he was.
So, are you saying that you think Q is showing up at his doorstep because of the way Picard feels about himself?
Yes.
And perhaps the way he has lived his life in his twilight years? Because if that's the case,
Yeah.
if the reason why Q shows up and he's disappointed, because his face is upset, and he's never been upset necessarily.
No.
He plays into it. He's very satirical. He overacts purposely. That's his personality. But he's never been outright angry.
Angry.
And in this trailer, he looks mad and
looks
like he's
mad.
doing something to punish Picard. And I'm wondering if it has to do with the fact that, hey, listen, I left you on a good note. You proved yourself. You proved yourself to be the beacon of humanity, and yet look what you've done over the last, 15, 20 years. It's time that you get a little reminder and a lesson. And if that's the case, if that's how they're using Q, then I'm on board.
Then I'm on board. Exactly. And that's why I said it took me a while to actually kind of get over the initial shock of the trailer. And after I watched it multiple times and you see the little details and I'm like going, well, if they do this, what I think they're doing with Q, I'm on board with it because it shows that personal attachment
Yeah.
that he has to Picard.
That's what it's always been about, Dave. Now, there are some questions pertaining to Star Trek canon, continuity, that has me a bit concerned because I'm not quite sure where he's going. They said the 21st century,
Yes.
I believe, in the trailers where they were sent. The 21st century, okay, first off, then it looked like in the trailer that the 21st century that they were in looked a lot like our 21st century.
Yes.
Which has me confused because I believe it was stated in the original series, Star Trek, that World War III took place, or a world war took place in the 90s.
Yes.
In the 90s. So if a world war took place in the 90s, and then the atomic era, with the atomic wars, I believe is what they were called, which actually was mentioned in Encounter at Farpoint, that took place in the 21st century.
And in Enterprise.
Right. So exactly. So we have to believe that this 21st century is not even part of the same timeline. Now, Q is the right person to use if you want to send them to a version of the 21st century that's not necessarily their timeline.
Yeah.
Then that would make sense. But
That
they're
would
going to
make
have to
sense.
explain that. And they can't take the approach that they did last season with Mike Shaban's idea that he didn't want to get into the weeds with Star Trek and explain things.
No, they have to get into the weeds.
Yes. And I was okay with that idea because I remember saying that's a good idea that Mike Shaban did that. Like, let's not get into the weeds because, let's be honest, most people that watch TNG, I don't want to say most people, TNG has a very specific audience. And a lot of TNG fans, us included, have watched other Star Trek throughout the years. But there are people who have only watched TNG. The mainstream, for the most part, those big people are the people that actually go to the big movies, I should say. For the most part, they know Picard, just like they know Captain Kirk.
Yes.
And they know Spock. They know Data. They know Picard. So I understand that in Picard Season 1, you had to stay away from some of those elements that required watching of other Treks for you to fully understand and grasp things. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean you can't explain things quickly so that new audiences can understand and that you can also keep continuity intact. And if you're dealing with time travel and the fact that 7 of 9 is no longer a Borg and you're bringing in the Borg Queen and you're going to the 21st century and using Q and you're doing all these different things, you're going to have to take your time. You're going to have to take your time and you're going to have to get into the weeds a little bit.
Yes.
Otherwise, you run the risk of derailing all the other Star Trek shows that have come before.
Yeah. Especially the element that basically had me intrigued was the fact that Q apparently puts Picard at first in a alternate timeline because they see the Federation, for some strange reason, is dressed more totalitarian, almost mirror universe like, but not as barbaric.
Didn't it look like Encounter at Farpoint aesthetics?
Kind
where
of.
Picard was standing? That's what it looked like to me.
Yeah. And he basically made the future of the Federation more
mirror universe-ish.
Mirror universes, not the actual mirror universe, because by far that did not look like the mirror universe.
No.
There was no indication that it was like the Terran Empire.
Right.
We basically just saw an alternate universe where the Federation is more totalitarian. They're more dictatorship type.
Okay, so do you think, I'm trying to follow your thoughts here because I like them. So do you think they are going to actually send them into actual time, like back in time, or do you think he's sending him to an alternate timeline?
I'm guessing that he sends him back into an alternate time because
That's the only way it'll work, Dave.
that's the only way it will work. And honestly, that is the type of thing that Q would do. He wouldn't affect, time itself. He wouldn't send them back in time. No, he would send.
Well, the continuum they don't even
won't allow it.
Yeah.
And instead, he would show Picard, hey, fine, if this is how you feel, then I'm going to show you an alternate timeline where you're like this and
see,
everything sucks.
That is good.
And basically, it's like, I'm
That-
hoping that the storyline after the trailer is Q not, and there's a lot of people thinking that Q's like the big bad villain, yada, yada, yada.
He's not a villain.
He's not a villain.
He's never been a villain.
What I'm hoping is basically Q is there to smack Picard in the face to wake him up,
He's the lesson.
and he's the lesson.
Yes.
And
or the teacher.
because that would make complete sense for that character of Q. He's not there to be mean or malevolent. He's there to actually kind of smack you in the face and say, "Hey, this is your potential.
Yeah.
Don't prove me wrong."
Now, Dave, the thing is the reason why I like your ideas is because that's the only way, in my opinion, would work. Now, you can get really convoluted and do things with Q that fixes things, but that would just be, very silly and convoluted, hacky as when it comes to writing. Because if they go into, let's say they go back in time, okay? This was the first problem I had. This is why when that teaser was released last month, I rolled my eyes on Facebook. I put a little sigh and roll your eyes emoji with the teaser because they've already established in the Kurtzman era, mind you, which was not even a year ago on Discovery, that when you go back in time, you create an incursion.
Yes.
And there's no coming back. If you do anything, you create a time incursion and you create a split.
Yes.
So that being said, let's say Q sends them back in time and it changes. Then they create a time incursion and they affect the timeline that can't be repaired because you create a split.
Yes.
So the only way this is going to work is if Q does send them back in time, or he changes time, let's say, whatever it may be.
Yes.
And it's a completely different timeline for whatever lesson.
Or it's a completely different use
And I
of...
hate saying this out loud because even that sounds convoluted.
It sounds convoluted, but it's the safest bet you can do because, if you were to send them back completely in time, it ruins a lot of what was set up, and it makes literally Star Trek, if they did that,
Yeah.
what would happen is they'd run into the Terminator complex.
Well,
where-
7 and 9 is Sarah Connor now, so that would
Pretty
actually
much.
work.
But they would literally destroy any sensibility of time and function, much like how people view Terminator now,
Yeah.
the franchise. So the way I figure is Q to Picard, the character.
Mm-hmm.
He sees it and he thinks that Q sent them back in time and changed something in time.
Yeah.
But Q is such an omnipotent power that he can do whatever he wants at a snap of a finger, right? He can make it look like it's time travel.
I know, and that's why it gets convoluted. You have to be careful.
And you have to be careful.
Yeah.
I mean, even
I think we're getting David caught up on time travel because honestly, if you really break down the trailer, it doesn't seem like Q sends him back in time. It seems like Q messes the timeline up, and then Picard chooses to use the Borg technology to go back in time.
to try to fix things.
That's what I think. They send themselves back in time to fix what Q did.
And what makes sense too, because remember at the whole point of First Contact was the fact that the Borg figured out how to actually go back in time,
Yeah.
which was absolutely ungodly, scary, dangerous.
Yeah. All right. So the trailer also revealed that season 2 will premiere in February 2022, which means we are getting nonstop Star Trek for the next almost 6 months,
Yes.
because we have Discovery. No, take that back. We have Lower Decks currently. We have
Yes.
Prodigy. We have Discovery. And we have Picard, all running into each other. So we're going to have a very busy 5 or 6 months here talking Star Trek. So February 2022 is the official release date for Picard Season 2 in the U.S. And last night, even though it was already talked about at other conventions, Season 3 has been officially greenlit. But we already knew this because John Delancey let it slip on a Zoom conference that they're shooting Season 2 and 3 back to back.
Back to back.
So now we have an official statement, which I do like that. I believe I said this on a recent show. I do like that they're shooting back to back, because that means that there's going to be some very tight continuity. There's going to be some tight consistency. And the fact that they're shooting 2 seasons back to back tells me they have 2 seasons planned, because we know from Shaban's mouth himself, last season's showrunner, that he didn't know what the series was going to be until after 5 episodes.
No.
What was that?
I have no idea.
You know what? We got to go to a quick break.
Yeah.
Hold on. We're having massive tech problems. And when I mean tech problems, I mean talking. We'll be right back. If you're on Twitch, there's going to be some muted audio because I can't play music on Twitch. We'll be right back in about 3 minutes. All right, we're back.
All right.
The studio dog was acting up. All right, so let's move on to the next bit of news here.
Which one is the question?
All right, so let's talk about Star Trek Prodigy.
Okay.
I didn't know what to expect. To be completely honest, I didn't know what to expect from that series, like what we were going to get, what it was going to be. When it was first announced, I want to say almost 2 years ago, that it was going to be, before we even had a name, before we knew what it was going to be about, they said that they're going to be releasing, I think it was longer than 2 years ago.
Yes.
They said that there's going to be a kids cartoon that is going to air specifically on Nickelodeon. And I kind of said, oh, that's kind of cool. It'll be a nice way to get the younger generation involved. But I automatically shrugged it off and said, well, that's not going to be something I watch. Then they decide, well, let's make this something that kids can enjoy, that is less kiddie in design, and we will just keep it from we'll write the show within a kid's perspective.
Kid's perspective, that's different. Yes.
But we're going to make sure this show appeals to people of all ages. Then it got interesting. And now, after seeing that trailer, my God, dude, that trailer, it was gorgeous.
Dude, I have been after Star Trek Day, after seeing the trailer and the teaser beforehand, this arguably is one of my most anticipated. And yes, Strange New Worlds is fantastic. I'm really excited for that. But Prodigy is actually my most anticipated series.
I think it's because it's something totally different.
Well, dude, this could honestly be the answer to one of the things that many fans have been saying when you compare Star Trek and Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars has Clone Wars. Star Trek doesn't have that. This is their answer. I honestly feel that Prodigy is trying to make a series that could be their answer to, let's not even say Clone Wars, their answer to Rebels. Because
People that don't know, there might be people out there that don't know what this is.
Yeah.
So you have to explain what Star Wars
So Star
Rebels
Wars
is.
Rebels, Star Wars Rebels was their one of their most successful Star Wars animations that kept the franchise alive
during the film hiatus.
Right. And Prodigy is like gearing up like that because I did a deep dive into like the background of like a lot of the people that the makers and the workers in Prodigy. A lot of them come from that group. You know, they come from the Clone Wars and the Rebels group because you have like a lot of the voice actors like D. Bradley Baker, who is infamous in Star Wars. He made the jump to Star Trek.
Infamous or famous?
Famous.
Yeah.
Let's say famous. And
Infamous is like Michael Chabon. Michael Chabon's infamous.
Yes. Some of the animators that are working on Prodigy have worked on Rebels.
Yeah.
And I'm like going, this seems like this is Star Trek's answer. Hey, we are going to make a series that can carry on the legacy of Star Trek.
And yes, and I think ultimately the main goal of the show is for it to bring in newer audience because it's going to air on Paramount Plus with the rest of Star Trek, but it will also air later on Nickelodeon.
Yes.
Which is also owned by Viacom and CBS. So that makes sense. That being said, the goal for this is to create a new generation of Star Trek viewers because as I've said since we started doing this show, Dave, most people realize that Star Trek fans are an aging fan base.
They're a dying fan base.
And up until Star Trek Discovery became a hit on the interwebs with the younger generation as well. When I say younger, I mean like the 30-something, late 20s. We were not restocking the pond. The fish were dying, and it was not being restocked. And now with Discovery helping with that and Picard bringing back some of those older fans and also bringing back people who have forgotten about Star Trek over the years. And then with Prodigy now restocking the pond with a younger audience. That younger audience is very important. And Prodigy is a very important project for the Kurtzman era Star Trek.
For the future of Star Trek.
For the future of Star Trek. And I don't feel like a lot of people completely understand that because this series will be what brings in, let's say, an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old. They have the potential now of growing up watching a Star Trek series and then realizing, I like this. And now suddenly you have a permanent Star Trek fan for life.
And honestly, dude, I think the creative choice to get Kate Mulgrew as Janeway.
Yeah. That's just icing on the cake.
That is the perfect character for this series. If they go the route of what we think it is, it's geared to bring in a new audience. The character of Captain Janeway is so much more appealing to newer audiences than, say, I hate to say it, than Picard, because Janeway is kind of like that mother figure. She makes everything comfortable for everybody, because that's what she was like in Voyager.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the strength of her as the captain when it comes to the captainship of Star Trek history. So bringing in Kate Mulgrew herself and the character of Janeway to this project really shows that they are trying to bring something that is going to go past one season.
Yeah. No, this has to be the foundation of the future of Star Trek. It has to be. Otherwise, there's no reason for this series to exist.
I picture, like, what would you say? It feels like with Prodigy, they're looking at this long term and thinking a 5-7 year season.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Now, the setting, which I definitely like, it's a far removed setting in a remote place, and they're keeping it a mystery. The idea is that these group of kids stumble upon a Starfleet starship, a Federation starship, and they assume control of it. That's the idea. And they now travel. And through their travels, they discover the ideologies of Starfleet, of the Federation, and they fall in love with this idea. And as the series progresses, you see them on their own through being trained via Janeway's hologram. They are trained in the ways of Starfleet, and they start to understand what it means to be a part of Starfleet
Yes.
and the Federation. That was the only thing that kept me from being completely sold on the series before this, was we were getting another show that was allegedly Star Trek, but not really Star Trek. I'm talking about Picard Season 1. There was just nothing that really echoed Star Trek, in my opinion, except you had Patrick Stewart playing Picard.
Yes.
The fact that you have Starfleet being front and center, and it represents, in fact, they said this numerous times during the Star Trek Day panel, optimism. The
Yes.
showrunners, the actors said Prodigy represents Star Trek to its fullest in the ways of optimism. And the fact that this is written through a kid's perspective, an outsider's perspective, that's what's interesting. Not just a kid's perspective, but an outsider's perspective, someone who's not in the know in the ways of the Federation, and yet you see them learn what it actually means to be a part of the Federation. And it's something that they long for, that they connect with. So the fact that you have that outsider perspective, I think, is a very strong perspective within the writing that will help bring in new audiences. It's what I always say, and I hate crossing streams like you do all the time. It was one of the best things about Star Wars Force Awakens with the inclusion of the new cast. The fact that Rey and Finn represented the new audiences of Star Wars, introducing new people, and through their eyes, they're introduced into this world of spectacle and awe, which is the world of Star Wars.
Yes.
And I have a feeling that's what they're doing with Prodigy. When they mentioned an outsider's perspective, I have a feeling that this show will be a starting point for new Star Trek fans, specifically kids who never have watched Star Trek. They now can, through the eyes of our cast, discover what Star Trek is all about.
Oh yeah.
And that's exciting. I really like the plans. And that is something I always talk about on a lot of our shows, Dave, is that when I watch panels or go to conventions, you are on it, little studio dog. Now she's chewing equipment. Hey, go.
Apparently.
Poor dog. She's bored. What was I saying? Oh, Star Trek conventions and conventions in general. What do I always say? I want to hear about the mechanics of what you're
Yes.
doing. Listen, I like the actors, and they're fun sometimes if they have a sense of humor, if they know how to, have a good time. But for the most part, I want to hear from the mechanics. I want to hear from the people working on the project, their thoughts from the writing room. What were their strategies? And that's why the Prodigy panel was one of my favorite panels of the entire night.
Oh yeah, especially since we got to actually hear from producers Kevin, I think it's Hagman and Dan Hagman.
Yeah.
Their insight on what their show is all about was really important. And I thought that it was starting off Star Trek Day with Prodigy and them explaining their concept and what Prodigy is supposed to mean was vital
Yeah.
to kind of set the tone for everyone watching and show, hey, Star Trek's here for the long haul.
And another thing, Dave, the fact that the showrunners were there expressing their thoughts on Star Trek, they got it all right.
Yeah.
They did their research. It wasn't like, I don't want to, yeah, you know what? Fuck it. It's not like Michael Chabon, who's interviewed, and they ask him about Star Trek, Picard, and what it's about, and he can't explain it. He's like, well, it's about a man who,
Oh, that was Kurtzman.
no, it was both of them. It was the two fucking puppeteers.
True.
So stupid. When you can't answer what a show is about, and your way of explaining what a show is about is by going through plot points, that means you shouldn't be writing, because that's not what a show is about. A show is never about the plot points. That's the plot.
Yeah.
That's how you're transporting the idea of a show. And the fact that these guys were able to explain their show without giving away really no plot details, and yet you walk away understanding what this series is about, is amazing. And that is why I am 100% excited about Star Trek Prodigy, when I really wasn't.
Oh yeah, and basically when you get down to it, I'm actually fairly comfortable with the Hagmans as showrunners. Essentially, that's who they are. They're the showrunners of the show.
Yeah.
But they're in safe hands. I like
They're in good hands, like Allstate.
They're in good hands, and
Yeah.
I do like the fact that hearing them talk also kind of exuded this sense of excitement. Like it was like very infectious. Like the way they were
Yep.
talking.
They were in love with the idea
They were
that,
in love with the idea
that they're
and
now a part of Star Trek.
they were passionate about it. And it even goes down to, I didn't even know the actor who was, I'm guessing he's the main lead of the show, is Brett Gray, who plays Dull.
Yeah,
And he's actually very charismatic.
he was.
And honestly, I think the kid can actually carry the show. He has a good cast of characters and good voice actors behind him to carry him on in the show. And it'll be amazing if they can make this character last long.
I think this is going to be a surprise hit for a lot of Star Trek fans.
I'm hoping.
I really do.
am. And that's the thing I walked away with Prodigy the most out of all the panels. Prodigy gave me the most hope for Star Trek, because I'm like, okay, it's in good hands. We know that these people are passionate about what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like blowing smoke up the
Yeah,
fans' butts,
yeah.
because unfortunately some of the panels, it was just a blow fest.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't want to get into that. There were some negatives. It's like this. It's the same topics on repeat. Like it's like they have like a bag of vocabulary words
Yes.
that are new and trendy on social media, and they just throw those out a few times.
But if you notice, like the best panels were
Yeah.
the ones where we genuinely felt the excitement of the cast and crew.
Yeah.
You know, like Prodigy started off well, and Lower Decks was freaking fantastic.
Yeah, and we'll get to Lower Decks in a second, but we're running out of time, Dave, so let's talk about Strange New Worlds. Okay, so this was the I want to say this was probably the news that really took the Star Trek interwebs by storm. I would say even more so than Picard Season 2 trailer.
No, I 100% agree. I think
Strange
so.
New Worlds, Dave, has the opportunity here to be the Star Trek show of the modern age.
Absolutely.
And what I mean by that, and I'm not putting down any other Star Trek shows.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No. Discovery is amazing. It fucks up a bit, but for the most part, I love Discovery. So I'm not going to pit them against each other. But this has the opportunity to bridge the different fans together. This is the show that can bridge the Discovery fans and the old fans together.
Yeah.
And unite the fandom, because this show, the way they explain it, is everything we are used to when it comes to Star Trek and more.
And more.
Because honestly, we don't want to see the same thing. We don't.
No.
We want new stuff. I'm not one of those fans that want 25 seasons of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Believe me, I don't. But this is the show where you can go back to the show's roots and really use a familiar format, and at the same time use modern television techniques to return to a similar format that's also slightly different. So you have the idea of episodic television, okay? And if people don't know what that is, that's basically classic TV, classic Star Trek, to be more specific and give you a better example. You have self-contained episodes. You don't have a continuous, to be continued serial, essentially, which is what all TV is for the most part nowadays. If you're watching HBO, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, even some network TV shows now, it's serialized television. You have ongoing episodes. They're not self-contained. Now, my problem with episodic television is many times you lose sight of character continuity. You lose sight of true characterization, because every week's a new episode, and you can have a loved one of a character die, and then the next episode, they're fine.
They're fine.
They never mention the loved one because they've moved on. And that, to me, just always felt very naive and immature. Even in the old days of writing TV, it always bothered me in the 90s, especially when I grew up watching a lot of TV. It was my problem with the original series, especially with the greatest episode of all time, the City on the Edge of Forever. Picard lost a woman he was deeply in love with. I loved her. And then the next episode, he's fine. Never brings her up. Never talks about her. She has no bearing on his characterization or his development as a character moving forward. That was always that's my problem with episodic television. Now,
Yeah.
what Kurtzman has said is that this will be just like that, except there will be character continuity.
Because not only is it the characters, but it's the relationships.
Yes.
And when he mentioned that, I absolutely got on board with Akiva Goldsman as the showrunner.
I like what he was saying.
Because Akiva Goldsman treated that panel like an old school television, how a producer would approach a television back in that day. You know, episodic television was supposed to be week to week. You know, there's always a surprise coming in the week, but the difference that he's going to be approaching it with is the relationships. He's still going to remember that we're a different audience nowadays than back then for episodic television, because back then we could shake it off. You know, audiences back then would just overlook it. Now audiences look deeper and deeper into their series because of the quality of writing and the quality of production. So Akiva Goldsman is actually coming into the series now with an old school mentality, but with the knowledge of a new way of thinking.
Yeah. I am completely on board with Strange New Worlds. And I think all of us were, especially since I think most of our listeners and you and I, Dave, can all agree that Star Trek Discovery Season 2 is probably the greatest of the new Star Treks to date. And a lot of it has to do with the amazing balancing act within that writing room when it came to all of those characters, when it came to Burnham's story, when it came to Saru's story, when it came to Tilly's story, when it came to Pike and Spock, and how they just meshed everything together, having a continuation of the pilot episode as a part 2. Yep. I mean, showing Pike's fate. Season 2 was amazing. So now you're taking some of that amazingness, the ingredients to the amazingness of Season 2 of Discovery, and using that now, mixing it with a little bit of the original series, and suddenly we have this TV show. They have to want to suck for this not to be good, in my opinion, because everything is there.
Everything's right there. And it got me so excited, even more so, seeing the cast. And while, yes, bringing in the old school characters like Ubanga and Nurse Chapel.
Oh, come on, Dave. That's spoilers.
Well, people who have saw the trailer should know, basically, is fantastic. But then you bring in other characters.
Let's get into that. Let's go through this new list, okay? So during Star Trek Day, they did release I want to say it was a character trailer. It wasn't really a trailer. It didn't show anything. It was a cast trailer, which I thought was pretty cool. And they introduced a few faces. First off, they said that we're getting legacy characters, which immediately made me excited and a little nervous.
Yes.
Because that just makes me nervous. First one up is we are getting a new version of Uhura, and she will be a cadet, which I think is awesome. We also, as you mentioned, are getting Nurse Christine Chapel.
Yes.
Which was played by Gene Roddenberry's wife, Michelle Barrett, in the original series. Which I think is pretty cool because we're getting because Majel, is it Majel?
Majel.
Yeah, is it Majel or Majel?
I believe it's Majel.
I'm going to up it up and just say Majel. And if it's not, then I'm just ignorant. Michelle Barrett, I then pronounced it different again. Whatever. Roddenberry's wife played 2 roles in Star Trek.
Yeah.
Actually 4 roles. Because she was the computer's voice.
Yeah, she was the computer's voice.
She was also Deanna Troy's wife in TNG. But before that, she played... Did I say Deanna Troy's wife?
Deanna Troy's mother.
Deanna Troy's mother. That might be kind of hot, though. You could tell it's getting very late here. She played Deanna Troy's mother. She played the computer on every single Star Trek during the 90s and early 2000s. She played Nurse Chapel in the original series. And she played Una, number 1, in the pilot in the original series. So I think it's pretty fucking cool that both of Barrett's roles or characters are now going to actually be included in Strange New Worlds.
Yeah, they're not going to disappear randomly.
Yeah. A lot of characters just evaporated during those old days. Yeah. We're also getting, as you mentioned, Dr. Mbanga.
Yeah, Ubanga, which is fantastic.
Now, he was the doctor in the pilot.
In the pilot. He was the first... He's the first doctor of the Enterprise with Pike.
Yeah. Now, the biggest one, I wouldn't really call this a legacy, but this is the character connected to a legacy, and it blew my mind.
interesting.
If I had the camera on when this was announced, you probably would have seen my mouth completely just drop.
Yeah.
So, a new character that's a part of Starfleet is Laan Noonien Singh. Now, that's the same last name as the one and only Khan. Now, a lot of people were like, well, how's that going to work? Who is she? She can't be his daughter because he's been in cryo freeze or suspended animation for countless decades at this point. So she is obviously a distant relative, and Khan is some distant
Probably
ancestor, I'm assuming.
Distant descendant.
Yes, because Khan cannot appear in this. There's no way he can appear because he doesn't make his appearance, and he's not released from his suspended animation until season 1 of the original series, which is still about 8 to 12 years away from this time period that Strange New Worlds takes place.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what they do with that character and how they draw those connections. I think we're in safe area here. I don't think there's gonna be any issues of continuity. I mean, it's very easily. She's an ancestor or a distant relative,
a descendant.
A descendant. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you, David, for being here to help me from being an idiot tonight. I'm like an ancestor. Nope, that's not right.
Well, the thing is like they're definitely on thin ice with that, because if you are connecting a Singh to the Enterprise crew, then my question would be, wouldn't Spock then know about the Singhs sooner?
Well, why would he though?
No, that's a good point.
I think what we're learning, Dave, is Spock is not very forthcoming with knowledge.
Oh no,
because he never told anyone about Burnham.
Yes,
he never told anyone about Cybok.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
well, it's hilarious.
He's very good at keeping secrets. So if you need a friend that keeps secrets, he's the one.
It's hilarious because you mentioned that, because I watched, I think it was The Final Frontier.
Yeah.
Where Spock
and Kirk asked him. Yeah, I know.
Kirk and McCoy both confront him and say, there's a lot of stuff you have not told us about your past. And then Spock just nonchalantly goes, well, you never asked.
Yeah, dude. And you know what? That's such a fucking Vulcan statement.
It's a douchebag
But you know what? It fucking works.
It
works. Actually, no matter how many Star Trek fans want to get mad about the Burnham being the sister, like a stepsister type thing. Yeah, listen,
Kirk never asked.
It kind of works. I mean, Spock isn't really forthcoming with information. I was making a joke, but it's actually true. It's actually kind of canon.
It's canon because, like, we saw it at Final Frontier, and I didn't realize it till I rewatched Final Frontier that, a lot
Spock
of people has kept a shit ton of secrets.
Yeah, I do remember when that movie came out, and there were people, because I read Star Trek magazine back in the old days. And the chat in the back, or not the chat, the comments, how they would publish people's notes.
Oh, yeah.
There were people that were upset with that. So people were the same back then. They screamed foul ball.
Foul ball.
How does Spock have a brother? Well, they explained it in the movie. He was exiled.
He was exiled, and also Spock just likes keeping his own personal life to himself unless he's asked.
Yeah, he's a good booty call to have, because you can, like, if you want to maintain professionalism on board, Starship, but you want that booty call with Spock, you can trust that he's never going to, like, tell anyone.
Oh, yeah. Well, think about it, man. I mean, like, some of the most classic Star Trek moments, even in the old series, it's always dealing with Spock keeping something from Kirk.
Yeah.
Like, Ponfar. He didn't tell him about, like, oh, Vulcans go through this.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So it does look interesting. Strange New Worlds. One of the highlights for me as well was how they explained Pike. And this is something they got into a little bit during Star Trek Discovery Season 2, that they don't really have a lot to go on when it comes to Pike. He's such an important character in the world of Star Trek, but there's nothing really to go on. He's almost like a blank slate. Or a blank canvas. You can do pretty much whatever you want with him. So it's going to be interesting to see how they recontextualize what we do know of Pike and move important pieces around on that board and really flesh out this character that we've all known for 55 years, but really didn't know, if that makes
Yeah.
any sense. It's going to
No,
be
it
really
is.
fun to see what they do with Captain Pike.
Well, that is one of the reasons why when we were watching it and after the cast thing, I immediately asked you if a certain other character, do you think they will actually bring him in?
Which
is
one?
Kirk. I mean, if you wanted to do a story of Pike,
yeah,
you have to throw Kirk in because Kirk was chosen by Pike.
it's going to happen.
And on top of that, so
Maybe not
Leori-
this coming season, but it's only a matter of time.
It's only a matter of time now because especially since they just opened the forbidden door of actually bringing in Uhura at this point as a cadet. What about the other crew? So does that mean my brain immediately just jumped to the front of the line and basically said, "Are we going to see Kirk?"
I think we're going to see a lot of different things. If we go with, if you remember, the way Star Trek Day started was with Kurtzman talking about things, and he mentioned an upcoming series that has been rumored, and for him to even mention it means that it's more than just rumored, I guess. But they have been mulling the idea of a Starfleet Academy
Yes.
series, which we've heard that now for a while. I mean, that would be a perfect way to start Kirk. Have Kirk be in that show,
In that
and then
show.
move him to Strange New Worlds, and then all of a sudden we have, Kirk on the Enterprise. So it could work. It's very easy to see how those parts can move. I'm not anxious to see that, to be completely honest.
Starfleet Academy?
No. Just having Kirk. I don't think
just
it's
having Kirk.
needed. We have a lot on our plates when it comes to Star Trek fans, and to throw Kirk in would just
yeah.
feel like it would feel too gimmicky.
Well, dude, I mean,
there's
just
no point.
just like what you said, we have 6 shows of Star Trek
Yeah.
coming up.
Now we do need to close out today's show, but first I do want to mention the other element that was discussed during Star Trek Day Strange New Worlds panel, and that's Spock's emotions. And people may scratch their heads and be like, Spock's emotions, yes, he does have them, and he did have them. Not in the original series necessarily, but in the pilot,
Yes.
which was never intended to be canon, but over the course of decades, it has slowly become canon. And now we have to deal with that sore thumb, which is Spock laughing, Spock smiling. In fact, they did do a little bit of that groundwork already in Discovery Season 2. They mentioned that he, I want to say they said, and I'm paraphrasing here, something about he's still working on controlling his array of emotions.
Yes.
Because people that may not be in the know, Vulcans do have emotions. They just repress them.
Yes, they control them.
They control them. So that's going to be actually a big element and a big part of Spock's story in this show is the emotional side. Meaning, how did we get from Star Trek, the original series, and the movie Spock, or I should say, how did we get from smiling Spock?
Yeah,
Is this making sense? There's too many timelines
too
here.
many timelines.
How
The pilot.
Here
We're
we go.
going from the pilot.
Yes. How are they going to reconcile the pilot and what they did with Spock with the rest of Star Trek moving past that point?
Yes.
And that's what they're going to do with his story. They're going to flesh out that aspect. And I was actually really happy to hear that,
Yeah.
because that's not only something that I feel is needed to fix some issues of continuity, but also that's a good story.
Oh, it is.
That's an interesting story.
Well, dude, I mean, even at the end of Discovery Season 2, the story of Spock became so much more interesting to me because, like, you laid the groundwork of... I don't want to use this word for what Spock and his emotional state after Season 2 was, but it was traumatic. He lost his sister. He had to say goodbye to his sister, never to see her again. And you knew... at the end of Season 2, you realized that he wasn't the same person after that.
No, he wasn't. And that's another thing that they can. That's a great point, Dave. That's another thing that they could add to his development as a character and really work through that aspect. And maybe that will actually be connected to his, or I should say, the emotional aspect.
The emotional aspect.
Dealing with the loss of his sister, the person that he was connected with. There's a lot of things to digest. We didn't get through a lot of, as much as I would like. We stuck on three big points.
Yes.
We will continue this discussion of Star Trek Day on a Patreon show. So if you are a Patreon subscriber, you will have access to that at the same time as this is released on demand. If you are not a Patreon subscriber, you can head over to patreon.com/RainmanDigital and pledge $5 or more a month, and you'll gain access to not just the second part of this discussion, but I want to say thousands of hours of additional Star Trek discussions, ranging from topics on the philosophy of Star Trek, discussions on the Borg, Q. We do it all over there. So patreon.com/RainmanDigital pledge. I want to thank everyone for listening. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Live long and prosper.
And good night.